Well, hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Four Expedition Unplugged. I'm Scott Luthold. Well, today I want to talk about the inconvenience of convenience. Now, I've talked about this in my book in the past. I've also written articles about it, and I find it to be a very fascinating subject, and I think it would be a great continuation from the previous videos that I shared with all of you on Unplugged. And I'm hoping that by talking about this particular subject, it gets you thinking about your life and just assessing how convenience actually creates inconvenience in your life. All right, so what is this thing, the inconvenience of convenience? Well, our Western society and that of other developed societies is addicted to convenience. But convenience isn't always a good thing. Having convenience in your life is nice in many ways. It alleviates the need for you to focus on the details of certain things. Let's just say, for instance, it's much easier to take a few bucks and go to the grocery store and buy milk than it is to try to get milk from a cow. These are the ways that convenience has allowed us to have a more productive and, I guess, a more privileged lifestyle in our society. But the truth is, as our society progresses, we become more and more addicted to convenience. And the trouble with convenience is that it allows us to be able to live a life that we want to live, which is a wonderful thing, but it also allows us to basically block out other issues around the conveniences that we are so addicted to. Okay, for example, let's say you want to buy a diamond for a ring. It's very easy to go to a jeweler and pick out a diamond and look at its clarity, select that diamond and have it set into a ring that you really like without really thinking about where that ring came from. We've all heard about blood diamonds before. Have you really sat down and thought about where that ring came from, who mined it, and how they were treated in the process of obtaining that diamond for you? And it's just so easy for us to overlook all of those details. And that's just one of countless examples that I could provide to all of you that talk about how inconvenient convenience truly is. Another example might be just how convenient it is to go to Costco and buy cases and cases of plastic bottles of water. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to stick those in your fridge. It's very convenient and very addicting to be able to open a refrigerator and just grab a bottle and, feel good to yourself that you're going to throw that bottle into a recycling bin and it's going to get recycled. Well, let's talk about that just for a minute. It's also very easy to buy a Berkey water filter and filter your own water and never have to utilize that plastic to begin with. But if you're going to utilize that plastic and you're going to throw it into a recycle bin, do you really know if it's going to get recycled? I mean, there's a lot of background information that you really need to obtain to understand whether or not that plastic is still going to a landfill. It's too easy for us in our society to just overlook these details and just go about our day because we already have a certain amount of stress in our lives having to do with the list of things that we need to accomplish and the constant mail and bills that are coming. All of these things make it really easy for us to say, okay, well, I've got these other things to focus on, and I'm not going to worry about the details. If something's going to make my life easier, I'm just going to go for it. Well, that's not really ultimately going to serve you or the greater good of mankind or the planet. I've had the fortune lately of having some conversations with a lot of young people, early 20s, people who are on their way to creating a life for themselves, a career, and so forth, shaping their perceptions on reality, and also shaping their philosophies on life. And what I find is that there's a lot of young generations that just believe, based on watching TikTok or watching Instagram, viewing posts on Twitter and so forth, that making money is a very, very easy thing to do. Well, I mean, in certain circumstances, making money can be very easy. Let's just say, for instance, you come up with a really cool app idea and you have some funding from family, and you can infuse a couple $100,000 into that idea on your own. And before you know it, it grows and it builds and you've got the support of your parents and so on. And somebody decides to buy that product from you for several $1 million and boom, you're rich. Another example might be that you're born into a family with money, or you're born into a family that has a very successful corporation that you'll just roll yourself into. So there are opportunities that do exist for a lot of people in the world where making money is a relatively easy thing. Maybe they start with money to make more money. But for the most part, people tend to have to work very hard to get to where they've come to. If I look back at my own career, I've had to work my butt off to prove myself time and time again to move myself up the corporate ladder. And, I have to say, at the end of the day, that responsibility that I had in order to get to where I wanted to go, to work my butt off, to have persistence and perseverance and drive to make things happen, has sort of given me a superpower in doing so. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's a lot of parenting styles out there where parents help their child all the way to whatever it is, help them into a career or bring them into a company that they've already started and whatnot. I think that's wonderful. But at the same time, I think that it also lends itself to not really truly serving the child. And in my life, my parents, I had good parents, but they didn't really support the way that a lot of parents would support, in which case I was responsible for myself and I was responsible to make things happen. And I think the trouble with the young generations right now is they believe that they should be able to obtain a position somewhere with 6 figures up right out of college, and that they should get a promotion within the first 6 months. And that's just not reality. And so some of the conversations I've had with young people lately have been around what do you truly want to do with your life and how do you plan to get there? One person I was talking to recently basically said, you know what, I'm graduating from college soon. I don't want to go into a career. I don't want to tie myself to the next 20, 30 years to a job just because I'm concerned about being able to retire. And I had to sit back with that person and discuss the fact that not every job is something you'll hate. In fact, it's better for you to consider that it's okay to build a career. It's okay to go to work for a corporation. So long as you're passionate about what you're doing, you'll love getting up and going to work. I shared with them that I've had jobs in the past that I absolutely loved and I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and go to that job. And that is a definite possibility for anyone that's in a position where they're deciding what they want to do with their life and what kind of a shift they want to make and what do they want to go after. A lot of young people think that it's just better to be self-employed. And I've been self-employed for many, many years, and there are a lot of advantages to being self-employed. But one of the advantages a lot of young people think is that if you're self-employed, you have a lot more freedom. Well, in some ways, that's very true. You can take a vacation pretty much whenever you so choose to go. But what they don't realize is that while you're on that vacation, you're not making any money. So there's a lot of things that I think young people just aren't aware of that it would be advisable for anybody that's been in a career for 10, 15, 20, 30 years could share with a young person instead of just looking at young generations and saying, well, they're foolish. They just don't have the wisdom that they need in order to be able to make decisions for their life that serve them in the long run. And I think that it's important to inspire young people to go out there and build a life for themselves, whether that be self-employed or going to work for someone else, but with the understanding and the reality that there's a lot involved in it. And it takes a lot of effort and commitment and drive and motivation to get up in the morning and stand up on your 2 feet and go for it and charge down that path each and every day. All right, now let's for a moment talk about how our addiction to convenience might be keeping you from the life that you've always wanted to live. And there's a lot of different aspects of our personal lives that I can apply this to that you could probably relate to. And I'll just use a couple of examples. Let's just say that you've got a job working for a corporation that you don't like. You don't like what you do. You don't like who you work with. You don't like who you work for. You maybe don't agree with what the corporation stands for. You don't like the 2-hour commute that you've got each way to get to and from work, but you do it anyway. And the reason you do it is because you have a nice home, you've got nice cars, you got a couple of kids that you want to make sure have the lifestyle that you always wanted as a child. And that's all wonderful stuff that we are, I guess, able to enjoy and celebrate in our Western society. However, there might be aspects of your life that you would like to see differently. You'd like to live differently. If you take a look at the way you live your life, how you live your life, and the comforts that you've created around yourself, it makes it very easy for us to just keep down a particular path, even though we might not be happy, because heck, we're living a life of convenience. It's great. You know, people in other countries, like developing nations in Africa, who are having to walk 2 miles to get their water, and you know, if they're lucky, they've got fresh water to drink. We take those things for granted, and we don't think about where our water comes from. We don't think about our actions and how our actions are polluting the water that we actually drink. It's very easy for us to overlook all of these details. And if you really take a look at your life and see your addictions to convenience and start making a few adjustments, and yes, maybe it's going to take a little more time and effort, but in the long run, I think it's probably going to serve you and the life that you live a lot better. I've got a number of people around me who've said, you know, Scott, you just have this great life that you live. I'm going to go do some of these things that you do. I'm going to live the life I always wanted to live. I'm going to fulfill my dreams, but I'm going to do it once I retire. I got another 10 years before I retire. And I mentioned this last week. It's very easy to assume that in 10 years, you're going to do all those things. But the reality is there's a lot of things that come up across that 10 years that could easily disrupt your path toward what you always wanted. It's really more important right now to start looking at this life of convenience that we all live and shedding some of our addictions and going back to a life where we are responsible for creating some of the things that are so easy for us just to obtain by throwing out a few bucks. But every time we throw out a few bucks and throw out a few more bucks and a few more bucks after that for this life of convenience, we start shackling ourselves with a monthly nut that we have to crack, and we become dependent on the job that we don't like. We become dependent on chasing that dollar. And when we are dependent on chasing that dollar because we're addicted to convenience, we don't really truly get to life that we really want to live. So if we come back to how the inconvenience of convenience affects our environment, I think it's really important to discuss. I think it's too easy with our disposable lifestyle to overlook just how influential each and every one of us is on the future of our environment. We talk about how corporations are working to reduce their carbon footprint. We're also talking about conscious investing, where people are investing in companies that care more about the environment, and I think those are wonderful things. But the reality is, with our convenience, we don't have to really concern ourselves with the poor of other countries. We don't have to concern ourselves with where our electricity is coming from and how it's produced. We don't have to concern ourselves with where the oil came from and how it was obtained and how that's affecting the environment and how those pipelines are crossing beautiful wild lands. And I could just go on and on with countless reasons why the inconvenience of convenience in our life is adversely affecting the life around us. And the reality is, we are the earth. So if we're killing the planet the way I believe we are, we're also killing ourselves. We live in a paradise bubble surrounded by eons and eons of darkness, dark space. And I don't think we have the right perspective as a species to truly understand the implications of that. And I know there's a lot of, lately in the last number of years, there's been individuals who have risen up and said, okay, well, we need to proliferate other planets for our sustainability and survival. And yes, there are things on this planet that can cause severe devastation and even extinction, and it's happened in the past on our planet. So yes, there is a need for us to proliferate on other planets. However, we also need to do the best we can to save our own planet and protect this incredible paradise. Imagine, if you will, that you were an alien from some other place and you were crossing these wide spanses of darkness and you discovered this sort of glowing blue ball. And you came and you went through the ozone and the atmosphere and you came down to the planet and you looked around. This would be an incredibly exotic place with incredibly exotic life forms. Yet we take those things for granted every single day. And we continue on with our day-to-day lives, driving our 2-hour commute to work and 2-hour commute back, drinking our plastic bottles of water, consuming fuels and fossil fuels that we don't have that, that can sustain our planet and sustain our societies. It's just an incredible thing how easy it is for us to overlook all of these details instead of looking and kind of zooming out from yourself and looking down on yourself from the sky, and then zooming out a little further to the moon and looking down on the planet and zooming out a little further and seeing just how tiny this paradise bubble truly is. And until we all start to wake up every single morning with that in the forefront of our minds, we're going to continue killing the planet. Earlier this week, I wrote an article about monarch migration, and it's a migration that, to me, is one of the most astonishing migrations of any species on our planet, considering how small they are, how delicate their architecture is, how far they migrate, and how many generations it takes to make a full migration. It's just a truly remarkable and incredible story. If you want to learn more about it, you can go on my website and read the Monarch In Peril story that I wrote. And at the end of the article, there's a couple of buttons. One of them is for you to take a free pledge to create monarch habitat on your property. And another one is an upcoming webinar that I encourage you to subscribe for. It's free as well. It's being put on by a couple of great organizations. I don't ask you to care about monarchs per se, although I think you should. It's just another species on the planet that shares this paradise bubble with us and has just as much right to be here as we do. And frankly, it is just one example of countless other just absolutely astonishing existences of creatures and species on this planet. And as a result, when you care about these other species, ultimately you care about yourself, because you care about your own environment, you care about your own paradise bubble, and you have to come to terms with and come to the realization that you are interconnected with all of these species. And if they don't survive, you won't survive. That's just how it is. It's like honeybees. If honeybees don't survive, you don't survive. So I ask you and encourage you to care more about your environment. I ask you to look at your life and see how addicted you are to convenience, and see ultimately how that addiction to convenience isn't really serving you, because it's killing your planet, which ultimately is going to kill you. So what I ask of each and every one of you is to sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, away from your computer, and put your thoughts on paper and list out all the ways that you feel like you have created shackles for yourself because of your dependence on convenience. And look at ways that you might be able to make some adjustments for the betterment of our environment, for our paradise bubble, for our fellow species that share this planet with us, that create all the color and the beauty and the awe that we get to enjoy each and every day. Look at how you take care of your children and decide whether or not your children really need to have everything that they've asked for. It's really important to take a look at all these things and make adjustments. And yes, look at your carbon footprint, but also look at how your addiction is shackling your life in ways that you probably don't even realize. Thank you.